It is Sunday, September 14th, 2025, and on this week's edition of Sunday Sofatime, we're talking about what are we actually paying for when we fly to the United States right now.
Just like the wind, just let it pass through, just let it pass you, you do what you do.
I'm Morgan from the Very Unofficial Travel Guides. I've been making travel videos for over 15 years of popular and not so popular tourist destinations to give you a very honest, unofficial look at what it's like to be there. My book, Places Please, includes a lot of helpful tips for traveling around the world, like what to do when you get Montezuma's revenge, and what happens when David Letterman pranks you in the back of a New York taxi cab. Places Please and my other book, Getting Stitches on a Cruise Ship, are available on Amazon now. Today's video is a little bit different because it's something I had to do a lot of research for. Don't worry, I'm okay. Usually here on the Very Unofficial Travel Guides during the week, I post a travel vlog showing you me out and about. At the moment, the main subject is the new Royal Caribbean Star of the Seas. And on the weekends, I sit down here on the red sofa and discuss some travel-related topic. Usually it's very light and opinion-based, and today it's a little bit different, like I said, because we're going to be talking about actual facts and something else that I'm not really good at.
Numbers.
The past few weeks I've been going through some budgetary things, some tax related things, and it's made me a little more focused on how much money I spend and what exactly I'm spending the money on. So I wanted to take a deep dive into the different fees and taxes and service charges and all that you pay for when you book a flight. We're going to talk about what they are, how much they are, who they go to, and why you have to pay them. And we're going to start with this sort of theoretical flight to Miami that I looked for. I thought, hey, maybe in March of next year, I'll fly to Miami for some kind of cruise. And by the way, check out these prices for people from Europe to fly to the United States right now. These are the prices from like 20 years ago. I mean, not even 700 euros for an international flight from Hamburg to Miami. Those prices are crazy, and I think it's because at the moment, not a lot of Europeans are flying to the United States. I wonder why that is. So when you're considering buying a flight, if you scroll down here, you can see it will tell you like the basic price, and then grouped together, it says government, taxes, and fees. But there's so much more to explore here, and if you click down here on this expanded menu, that's what we're gonna get into, starting with the actual flight and carrier fees. So this is what you're paying the airline for the flight, for your seat in economy or economy plus or business or wherever you sit. This is probably the easiest part of this whole system to understand. This is what you're paying for your seat on the plane. And on this flight, that's actually only 169 euros, which is crazy to me to think that, okay, just for the airline alone, like if it wasn't for all these other things, I could fly to Miami for 169 euros. And it's all these other things that get added to it that change the price. And the next thing is the SAF Alternative Aviation Fuel Surcharge. So here in the EU, there are regulations that define what fuels the airlines can use. They are slowly transitioning from the sort of old school kerosene, which was very, I guess, harmful to the environment, to... Oh my gosh, can you hear that? Why do they have to be testing the emergency warning system at 11 o'clock on September 11th here in Germany? Well, that was exciting. Where was I? So this alternative aviation fuel surcharge is something that the airlines are required to pay due to these EU regulations, and it's steadily growing, and those are charges that the airlines pass on to the passenger. And the airline doesn't keep this money, it goes directly onto the government. The next thing on the list is very similar, but also pretty different. It's called the Carrier Imposed International Surcharge, and there's usually a Y YR or a YQ next to this. As you can see for this flight, this is a whopping 241 euros, which is like over, what is that, like 40% of this flight ticket. From what I read and how I understand this surcharge is something that the airlines were sort of given by the government in order to compensate for the fluctuating price of oil. So just like when you're on a cruise, sometimes you will get an extra surcharge added to the price of the cruise after you've booked it because the price of fuel just has gone up so much. The airlines can do that too, but here's the thing. It's no longer regulated from what I understand, and the airlines can basically make up this number and all that money just goes to the airline. This is something I still don't completely understand. How do we feel about that? I feel like somebody needs to take a look at this. All right, now we're gonna move on to a bunch of things that are also very similar but have some interesting differences. Many of these are flat fees that everybody on the plane is going to pay. You know what? Let's just get into it. And the first one on this list is the air transport tax in Germany. This is a tax decided by the government. It goes directly to the German government. It's based on the distance of the flight, and it's only paid by passengers whose flights are departing or arriving in Germany, and not by people who are just transferring through Germany. The US has a very similar thing. It's called the transportation tax for the USA and its border zone. This is also just for flights arriving or departing the USA, and the money goes directly to the IRS. And now it starts to get even more complicated because now we have the international passenger service charge for France and the international passenger service charge for Germany, as well as the airport security charge for Germany and the French airport taxes. From what I understand, all of these things are a flat fee. This doesn't like go up and down compared to anything else during the year. So these international passenger service charges for France and Germany, this is money that goes to support the airport infrastructure. So basically, improvements of the airport. The airports are allowed to charge the airlines basically for using the gates, using the people who work in the airport, using the parking structures, all of that. That's what you're paying for when you pay this flat fee to fly into or out of whichever airport you are using. But then there's also the security charge, which goes to paying the people who take care of your security at the airport, and that's a separate charge than the international passenger service charge, of course, I guess. By the way, these airport fees, they vary depending on which airport you're using. So let me know in the comments, do you live close to like an especially expensive airport or an especially inexpensive airport? I'm interested now to know which airports are the least expensive. However, I do know from an article that popped up when I was going through this research that the UK, they have the most expensive airports. So people out there who fly into and out of the UK, sorry about that. Why am I apologizing? It's not my fault. And now we get to the exciting fees that we pay the USA to fly there and fly out of the country. Are you still watching? Are you still here? I know this is a lot of facts and numbers, but I found it interesting to just go through all this and look at what all these little fees are and who's getting this money. So the first up on the list is the customs user fee for the USA and Puerto Rico. This is money that goes to the CBP, which is the Border Patrol. By the way, I know I've talked about this before, but do you like to watch the Border Patrol television show? There's like Border Patrol Australia, Border Patrol New Zealand. They do it from many different airports, and what they basically do is just show all these people who work at Homeland Security or whatever it's called in whatever country they're at, checking the people who come in and out of the airports, and also checking packages that are shipped in and out of the country. If you haven't seen this show, there are some really naive travelers out there, people who have their suitcases full of plants and perishable food, full of cigarettes or drugs, and the way that they act and react when they get busted is sometimes so entertaining. However, I also have to say, I do feel really sorry for a lot of these people, especially those who are smuggling drugs, because I think a lot of times they don't really have a choice. Either the situation in their life has made them so desperate that they decided to try it, or somebody has forced them into doing it, and either way, they're still going to jail. But yeah, a lot of times when people get busted, they think if they mention that they have a short time to get to their connecting flight, that the Border Patrol officers are going to be like,
Oh, I'm sorry. We don't want you to miss your flight, so please leave with this heroin in your shoe.
some people. All right, next thing is confusing to me, and I had to read a lot about it to understand it, because the first thing that we talked about, this customs user fee, that funds the CBP, but the next fee is the immigration user fee, and that goes to the Department of Homeland Security. Security! And I was like, what? Aren't these two like the same thing? The way I understand it, the Department of Homeland Security is like the big department, and then the CBP is part of that organization. And speaking of security, the next thing also has to do with that. It's called the Civil Aviation Security Fee, or a lot of people know this as the 911 fee, I guess, because it was put into existence after September 11th. What a coincidence. Today is September 11th as I'm recording this. And this I found a little bit interesting when I was reading about it, because up until September 11th, a lot of the programs that were in place to ensure our security as air travelers in the United States came from federal taxes. So even people who never went to an airport or never got on a flight were still part of the tax money that they were paying was going to fund airport stuff. And after 9/11, when all these things began to change as far as heightened airport security and the way that we travel nowadays, it was decided that the airlines should be required to pay for this. And because the airlines were required to pay for it, they decided that we have to pay for it as passengers. And by the way, this is something that not only international travelers are going to have to pay. This is any time you fly inside or out of or into the United States. Just to back up a little bit again, as far as the security charges go, we have the customs users fee that goes to the Border Patrol. We have the immigration user fee that goes to the larger Department of Homeland Security. And then we have the Civil Aviation Security fee, which is the 911 related fee that used to be covered by federal taxes and is now paid for by this tax. And next we have two tiny little fees that are not even €4. The first one is the USA Passenger Facility Charge. This is something that the airports are allowed to charge the airlines also for local improvements. So just like the international passenger service charge in Germany and France, it's basically the same thing. But in France, for this flight, it would have been $35.99, and the same, basically the comparable charge for the USA would have been $3.84, cheaper. And then we have another confusingly named thing called the APHIS, which also has to do with customs and immigration, but there's an important difference. So the Department of Immigration, they're checking you, basically, the person who is arriving or leaving the country. The Department of Customs is checking stuff, so like your bags and goods that you are bringing in, but in that category, there's also the category of like living things like food, plants, and animals. And that is what this APHIS fee is. It's checking those people who have like birds' nests and boiled eggs and seaweed in their bags, or live snakes hidden in their underwear. I'm not making it up, people. Watch Border Patrol. It's important that those people are there, and that is just interestingly enough, the lowest fee or tax or service charge on this entire list. So what do you think of all this? I just found it totally interesting to go through and see, okay, of this money I'm paying for the ticket, how much is actually going to the airline, and how much is the airline collecting to pay to the government, to the airports, to the people who check for plants in your bags? If you're an expert in this field and I got something wrong, please let me know in a constructive, friendly way. Everything I've reported here, everything I've said is, I wrote things down. I read articles. I don't usually do that. In last week's travel vlog, we walked all around Coco Cay with 2 gigantic cruise ships there to see how crowded is it. Is it crowded? Did you watch that video yet? What did you think? Is it like you expected it would be? And in next week's travel vlog, we're going to be back on the Star of the Seas, so make sure you're subscribed and check back soon if that interests you. I'm Morgan from the Very Unofficial Travel Guides, and I hope to see you back here soon. Bye-bye!
So until next time, I'll leave alone and just like that I'm back to be